The night was thick with fog, curling like smoke around the dimly lit train station in rural Ashville. Rain pelted the wooden platform, hammering against the rusted benches and splintered beams. Only the faint flicker of an old lamp-post fought against the darkness. A lone figure hurried along the platform, coat collar raised, water dripping from his hat. He was a journalist, drawn here by whispered rumors of the last train to Ashville, a train that no one ever seemed to reach. Others had arrived before him, a young man clutching a worn backpack, eyes darting nervously at every shadow, an elderly man leaning heavily on a cane, muttering to himself about trains that don't exist, and a woman dressed entirely in black, her long coat brushing the wet wooden boards, a locked trunk held tightly in her grasp. Each seemed ordinary at first, yet there was a tension in their movements, a subtle awareness that something was not right. The station master appeared suddenly, stepping from the shadows. His face was gaunt, skin pale, eyes sunken deep into their sockets. He spoke softly, voice like dry leaves. "The train. It leaves at midnight. Once you board, you may never return." He handed the journalist a crumpled ticket, though he made no motion to accept payment. Then he stepped back into the fog, disappearing as though swallowed by it. Minutes later, the rumble of an approaching engine shattered the tense silence. The train arrived with an eerie hiss and groan, its black metal exterior slick with rain. Steam poured from its undercarriage like smoke from a furnace that had burned for decades. Its windows flickered with light, but the glow was sickly, casting more shadows than illumination. The air smelled faintly of decay and iron. The passengers hesitated. The young man wanted to leave, but an unseen force, a pull stronger than logic, drew him forward. One by one, they stepped onto the train, the doors creaking closed behind them. Inside, the car smelled of damp wood and old upholstery. Flickering lanterns lined the ceiling, and shadows danced along the walls as if alive. No conductor, no staff, only empty corridors stretching into darkness. As the train began to move, the familiar world outside melted away into a dense fog. The buildings of the station vanished, replaced by a landscape blurred and shifting like a painting left to run in water. A low whisper curled through the air, calling each passenger by name. At first, subtle, it grew louder, insistent, intimate. The journalist pressed his hand against the cold window, staring into the fog, and felt a creeping dread. Outside, shadows seemed to stretch, forming grotesque shapes just beyond sight, writhing and shifting with a life of their own. The young man shivered, muttering, I don't think we're going to Ashville." The woman in black remained calm, clutching her trunk tighter, as if she alone understood the danger. The train's wheels groaned against the tracks, a sound that was almost alive, resonating deep within their bones. As they sped into the darkness, the sense of being watched intensified, and the passengers realized this was no ordinary journey. The last train to Ashville had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The train rattled through the endless fog, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on steel tracks echoing like a heartbeat in the passengers' chests. Inside, the car grew colder, the air heavy and damp. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally, as though the train itself were alive, watching them. The young man shivered, hugging his backpack tightly, while the elderly passenger muttered to himself, eyes darting to every darkened corner. It began subtly at first. A reflection in the window twitched, moving independently of its owner. The journalist, notebook in hand, leaned closer, blinking. The reflection smiled, an expression he had never made. Heart pounding, he stepped back, but the flicker of the otherworldly grin lingered. Then came the whispers, faint at first, curling along the edges of the car, calling their names in soft, intimate tones. Personal secrets, fears, regrets, they were spoken aloud, even though no one was near. The mysterious woman in black remained eerily composed, clutching her trunk, yet the air around her seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. Suddenly, a passenger, the young man, vanished. One moment he was gripping the railing, the next he was gone. A hollow echo of his scream filled the car. Moments later he returned, pale as ash, eyes blackened like empty pits, lips sealed in a mute smile that chilled the others to the bone. Panic spread. The journalist ran through the narrow corridors, searching for any sign of staff or exit, only to find the passages empty. Doors led to the same flickering carriages, hallways looping impossibly, as though the train had no true shape. Every attempt to leave ended where it began. In a hidden compartment, the journalist discovered a shocking sight, a room filled wall to wall with photographs. Faces frozen in terror stared back, many of them showing expressions identical to those currently sitting in the car. Some images seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly, eyes shifting to track his movements. He realized with horror that the train kept its passengers here, preserving their fear forever. Time itself had no meaning. Clocks ran backward. The food in the dining car rotted instantly, leaving a stench of decay. The fog outside repeated the same pattern endlessly, trees looping like a painted backdrop. Shadows pressed closer, whispering, taunting, exploiting every doubt, every fear. The elderly man whispered, voice trembling, "It feeds on what we fear. It knows us." The young man's hollow gaze confirmed it. The woman in black finally spoke. "It isn't just a train. It's a trap. It doesn't carry us to Ashville. It carries us away." As the car rocked violently, the shadows gathered in corners and behind seats, elongating into grotesque shapes that pressed against the walls, watching, waiting. The passengers realized they were not merely riding the train, they were being hunted by it. Every mile, every turn drew them deeper into a nightmare from which there might be no escape. The journalist gripped his notebook tightly, recording everything, though he felt the creeping inevitability of their fate. He glanced at the fog beyond the windows and understood the truth. Ashville was a destination that did not exist, and this train, it was endless. The train shook violently as it hurtled deeper into the fog, the rails groaning under its unnatural weight. Shadows in the corners of the car thickened, coalescing into forms that were almost human. Almost, but not. Each passenger could feel the oppressive presence of something watching, waiting, savoring their fear. The journalist led the small group toward the rear of the train, where a strange, pulsing darkness seemed to gather. Every step echoed unnaturally, and the air grew colder, seeping into their bones. The young man's hollow eyes darted around, catching fleeting glimpses of figures with elongated limbs, faces twisted in silent screams. He whispered, "It's alive. It wants us." In the last carriage they found it, a humanoid shadow, tall and featureless, its edges writhing like smoke. Its presence radiated malevolence, and with each step it took, the temperature dropped further. The journalist could feel it probing his mind, dredging up every doubt and fear. He staggered, nearly falling to his knees, but forced himself forward. The entity revealed the truth. The train was a vessel for lost souls, a predator that fed on memories, regrets, and fear. Every passenger it captured became part of its endless journey, their essence consumed to power the train's eternal motion. Faces from the photographs the journalist had seen earlier began to float through the shadows, their silent screams echoing in the corridors. Panic erupted as the shadows lunged. The young man was pulled into a dark compartment, his screams reverberating as the door slammed shut. The elderly man, frozen with terror, felt unseen hands clutching at his chest, dragging him backward. The woman in black remained steady, clutching her locked trunk. "The engine," she whispered urgently. "It's the source. If we reach it, we might stop this nightmare." With little choice, the remaining survivors pressed on. The train's interior seemed to stretch impossibly, corridors looping and twisting. Each carriage held visions tailored to the passenger's deepest fears. The journalist saw his worst failures replayed endlessly. The young man saw phantom versions of lost loved ones beckoning him into oblivion. Even the woman's own memories tormented her, shadows of past betrayals pressing her toward despair. At last, they reached a heavy iron door marked with strange symbols that pulsed faintly. Beyond it, the engine glowed with an eerie, living light, black smoke curling upward like tendrils. The shadow waited, a monstrous silhouette against the fiery glow, its intentions clear. It would consume them all. The group realized the train wasn't merely a curse. It was a sentient entity thriving on the terror of those foolish enough to board. Their only hope was to confront it directly, face their own fears, and somehow wrest control from the darkness that had claimed so many before them. As the train roared into an endless tunnel of fog and night, the passengers prepared for the confrontation, knowing that failure would mean becoming part of the train forever. The shadows pressed closer, whispering, mocking, promising that no one would ever reach Ashville, and that those who tried would vanish just like the rest. The survivors stood before the engine, its glow pulsating like a heartbeat, black smoke curling upward like grasping fingers. The shadow loomed, a monstrous silhouette that seemed to breathe with a malevolent intelligence. The train groaned, metal screeching as if in pain, and the corridors behind them twisted and warped, trapping the remnants of the lost passengers' screams within the walls. The journalist swallowed his fear, gripping his notebook and pen like a lifeline. "It feeds on us," he whispered to the group. "Everything we feel, every regret, every fear, it's fuel for it. If we don't do something, we'll disappear too." The woman in black stepped forward, opening her trunk to reveal a set of ancient tools, ritualistic in design. "This train, it isn't just a curse," she said. "It's alive. It sustains itself by trapping souls. To survive, we must either become part of it or destroy it. A violent tremor shook the engine, and shadows lashed out at them, whispering promises of safety if they surrendered. One by one, passengers faltered. The elderly man collapsed, consumed by visions of lost loved ones, his soul drawn silently into the engine. The young man screamed as phantom versions of friends and family beckoned him into shadowed compartments. The journalist and the woman pressed on, navigating the surreal, shifting interior of the engine. Every step forward felt heavier, as though the train itself was resisting their approach. The shadow coiled around them, probing their minds, dredging up memories of fear and guilt, trying to weaken their resolve. Finally, they reached the heart of the engine, where a pulsating mass of darkness awaited. It shifted and writhed, countless faces pressed into its surface, screaming silently. The woman performed a series of precise motions with her tools, chanting softly. The engine convulsed violently, emitting a wail that rattled the train. Shadows shrieked and recoiled, momentarily weakening the entity's grip on reality. The journalist understood the choice before them, to leap into the unknown outside the moving train, risking oblivion, or be consumed and become part of the endless cycle. One by one, he and the woman dove into the void, their bodies swallowed by darkness, leaving only echoes and whispers behind. Inside the train, the shadow's cries faded, but the vehicle did not stop. It continued, unstoppable, looping endlessly through fog-laden landscapes, seeking new passengers at the station. The screams of the consumed haunted the corridors, their eyes appearing briefly in reflections before vanishing again. Decades, or perhaps moments later, the train arrived at Ashville. To the new travelers, it seemed ordinary, lanterns flickering, doors creaking, the engine sighing. They stepped aboard, unaware of the horrors that awaited, unaware that each mile would strip away their essence until nothing remained but shadows. Outside, the fog swallowed the train once more, leaving no trace of the world beyond the tracks. And somewhere, in the twisting corridors of the endless engine, the journalist's notebook rested, pages filled with frantic scribbles, a warning no one would ever read, a testament to the truth: no passenger ever reaches Ashville. The train rides forever, and those who board are never free.